The market composition of those who purchase and use Bitcoin has changed drastically over the past 15 years. Many people like to look at the institutional side of the market and how that's changing. Of course, you know I like to do that. But there's another interesting element which has to do with retail participants. How can people buy Bitcoin in an easy way that's familiar to them? Well, today Akin Fernandez is with me on Crypto Clarified. Welcome back. Akin is the CEO and founder of Azteco, the Bitcoin voucher company, access to over 180 countries, and is absolutely fascinating, very smart person. And I've been looking forward to this. As you know, my name is Benjamin Dean. I am Director of Digital Asset Strategy at WisdomTree. Say his name and he appears. Crypto Clarified, you're back because we like to help you navigate the complex and fast-moving digital asset space. Never a dull moment. So, before we jump into the episode, US listeners, wisdomtreeprime.com. You can find it on the Apple or Android app stores. Hit subscribe and share. You know you want to. Helps other people get this excellent information. And then you can find me on the Bird app X at Benjamin Dean. Let's jump into the episode with Akin. Akin Fernandez, beauty on. Welcome to Crypto Clarified.
Thanks for having me, Benjamin.
I've been following your work for many, many, many years, and you are quite prescient in the way in which you saw Bitcoin and how it would evolve, but also you and I both share a mutual interest in technology history. So before we jump into the episode and we go down that rabbit hole, which the listeners know I love going down, how about you just give them a little bit of insight into you, your work, why you work on Azteco, and what you're doing there?
Well, insight about me, what you see is what you get, I suppose. Actually, no, that's very dangerous because people see what they want to see. So we'll have to strike that out. But the reason why I did Azteco, because I have an interest, a long-term interest in money, what money is. And when I, to cut a very long story short, when I heard about Bitcoin, I knew that was the answer to several of the questions about how to solve the problems with the fiat money system. And so I tried to get Bitcoin myself, found it was very, very difficult, and then decided that there is a better way to supply Bitcoin to anybody who wants it. And that was the genesis of Azteco, a voucher system using the same method that billions of people all over the world use to top up their mobile phone account so they can make phone calls. And so we put these two things together, we have Azteco.
It is meeting people where they are. Usually, well, back in the day, there's a video somewhere on the internet of me trying to explain hash functions to lawyers in Washington, D.C. This is maybe 10 years ago. And, blank stares. Well, if people already know how to buy mobile top-up vouchers, they've been doing it for years and years and years, it works. Taking that technology and putting it together, making it usable. You don't need to explain hash functions or public key cryptography. It just works, right? And I know you've been working on this for many years, and you also managed to build it into an international business. How about you give the listeners some color on how many countries you operate in at the moment and kind of the uptake, one might say, of the service?
Well, we operate basically in 190 countries through a series of distributors that we have based all over the world. And what they do is they have an API connection to our servers that allows them to sell 16-digit voucher codes from our system. And they can display them in any way that they like. And so we're a global company now. And this is what we're working on, is the increasing the distribution of Azteco into different territories. And we have some astronomically big distribution deals that are on the horizon that are going to put us into several banks. And these banks each have 100 million users. And so we are about to have an explosion in access to Bitcoin on terms that anyone can understand, that doesn't involve explaining hash functions or anything else, or the blockchain, or anything else that people think are prerequisites to using Bitcoin, which they are not. So that's what we're working on, and it's the missing link in the evolution of the Bitcoin ecosystem, the demystification of it, the simplification of it, and the widespread distribution of Bitcoin. Some of the biggest Bitcoin companies out there have 85 million, 75 million users. We are talking about orders of magnitude scale increase in access to Bitcoin through Azteco. I think everybody's going to be very surprised and very shocked when we make this announcement. And I'm having to bite my lip under extreme discipline, not giving all the details away. But believe me, it'll be worth waiting for. And we're going to change the world. We're not going to just change the world when it comes to the distribution of Bitcoin, but we're going to change the global perception of Bitcoin. And this is an absolute prerequisite to Bitcoin becoming ubiquitous. And we're working very hard on it, and we will succeed at it.
There's an interesting kind of element here that I know you know, but when it's an open source, distributed database, globally accessible via anyone with a cell phone, smartphone, feature phone, my colleague Jason, he says there's more more smartphones than toothbrushes out there, which is kind of a funny little stat. But that idea of it being a globally accessible database it does mean like the ability, if one can do the distribution channel, the ability to reach orders of magnitude more people is I'm not going to say it's unprecedented, but the rate at which that I guess you call it a Pareto distribution. It's like normal. It goes nuts. So there is an interesting thing here, which is what is Bitcoin then? Because a lot of people like to say it's money, it's a commodity. They try and shoehorn the idea into existing concepts. But, you know, what is Bitcoin at its core? Because that's actually the secret, or it's not a secret, but it's like that is the key insight that allows one to access orders of magnitude more people globally.
Well, it might as well be a secret because um, the true nature of Bitcoin isn't used as a basis of the business models up and down all over the world. Bitcoin is a database. That's all that Bitcoin is. It has some unique characteristics in that the number of spaces, number of rows in this database are programmatically limited, but it is a database. That is all that it is. And the mistake other people are making is to think that the analogies used to describe Bitcoin and the effect of Bitcoin when you use it, and conflating that with what Bitcoin actually is. And when you think about Bitcoin as it's at its nature, as it is in as without using an analogy to describe it, then the business models that you can construct around Bitcoin become obvious. Just like WhatsApp, Signal, and all of these other services all use databases at their core level. Nobody would say that Signal and WhatsApp exchange messages that are money. And they use exactly the same technology, quote unquote, as Bitcoin. And so it's very, very important that when you're talking about making a business model or writing software in any particular field or going to the legislature to ask them to look at something to see whether it should be regulated or not, that you talk about things as they actually are and not by analogy. That's why when people go to a legislature and talk about public blockchains and private blockchains, this is a distraction and a mistake because
Mm-hmm.
there's no such thing as either of those things. Those are all databases. And to say that there's such a thing as a private blockchain is like saying that the database on your phone that has your address book in it is a private address book, and that's somehow different to a yellow pages. Is the biggest mistake that's been plaguing this whole nascent industry. And I'm afraid that the only way that we're going to break through um, this delusion is by showing people what Bitcoin actually is by putting it into the hands of many, many people. And in the same way that Uber is not a taxi company, but it provides a service that can compete with taxis, Bitcoin isn't money. It doesn't have to be money. And it can compete with every single financial service that's out there, whether it's Western Union, Rio, or any bank where you can get an account and then send money from one person to another. And as you know, if you have a wallet of Satoshi or a green address, you can then send Bitcoin to anybody on earth without having to ask permission from anybody or go to a third party to get it done. And this is the breakthrough that is going to change everything. If we can get Bitcoin into the hands of everybody on earth. And the most likely candidate to do this is Azteco, because we have the least friction way of getting Bitcoin to those people who number in the billions, literally, but who also don't have a vast fortune to put into Bitcoin or a portion of their money to put into Bitcoin. They have a daily need to send, save, and spend money. And if we can get Bitcoin into their hands, onto the phones that they already have, using apps that cost nothing to download and install and use, then something very, very important is going to happen. In the same way that apps like WhatsApp basically destroyed the SMS service ecosystem by providing free messages peer to peer, Bitcoin will do exactly the same thing. And there's 1 billion, over a billion WhatsApp users. It took them 4.5 years to reach a billion people. Once we get the on ramps to Bitcoin ubiquitous and frictionless, we should expect a same rate of adoption for Bitcoin. And that's exactly what we're going to do at Azteco and with our new distribution partners who can do this at scale. We're going to see exactly this happen.
So, sorry, folks, those of you who are watching on Spotify or YouTube, yesterday there was a little bit of a hiccup. That is Microsoft Windows, Lenovo pushing updates. I think there's a 0-day out there. At least that's what I've seen so far today. But I'm back, differently attired, but so is Akin. So, Akin, let's pick up where we left off yesterday, which is one topic is why would people accept something that is kind of deficient technology when there are much better alternatives?
Well, normally the excuse they give is it's the standard, which goes back to the Microsoft thing. We use Microsoft because it's the standard. And this is what the Ripple people have been saying for ages. And they get used to things. And if they can do the things that they need to do, the vast majority of people don't care about the little 10% extra quality you can get or the privacy you can get or things like that. It's like VHS versus Betamax. There were more films available on VHS than they were on Betamax. And so Betamax being technically superior is not of any interest to anybody. They want to watch Die Hard. And so if Die Hard's in Blockbuster Video, then I'm showing my age now. If Blockbuster is if the Die Hard's in Blockbuster Video and it's only on VHS, everybody's going to get a VHS player, and that's the end of the story. And then, of course, once that happens, the home taping, VHS blanks, video camcorders that had to take VHS tapes become all the rage. And of course, those VHS tapes were bigger than the Betamax tapes, and so the camcorders were bigger than they would have been had everybody gone to Betamax. And what this says is that trying to control the platform too closely can actually be counterproductive if you want to capture a market. This is why you have to let people download software, whatever it is, and let them get on with using it so that you can capture the market, capture the mind share. Another really good example of this is the PDF format. Now, before PDFs were ubiquitous, PDF is actually a format invented by Adobe. Now, before there were PDFs, there was a format called Replica. and it worked almost identically to the PDF. But the company that owned the standard wanted you to pay to make replica documents that you could share, which is crazy. So they lost the market share when PDF came onto the scene, and there was a thing called Adobe Acrobat Distiller that you could install as a printer driver to make an unlimited number of PDFs. And of course, since PDFs were spreading like wildfire, being produced in literally in the millions, the Acrobat Reader became a necessity for everybody because everybody was using PDFs instead of replicas. The replica disappeared. Nobody remembers it except people like me. And these fundamental market forces are, believe it or not, still in play today. And I think we could actually even extend this to the AI phenomenon, so called, where if these models, these large language models, are gate kept, or what's it called when they put behind a
Lock-in
paywall?
effect.
Well, the way they put it behind a paywall, so you
Oh,
get the bigger features. Somebody's going to come along who has some money and give away this new superpower everybody's using, and then they're going to stop using the paid version of ChatGPT, which, by the way, is so heavily censored and so heavily controlled that it's very, very frustrating to use. And so the market is a real thing, and human beings are make up and are part of the market, and we can't ignore this. And Bitcoiners ignore this at their peril because there's going to be the equivalent of something VHS versus Betamax, which can come out and completely dominate the entire market because the people working in Bitcoin, the companies, and the people who are trying to spread it refuse to face the reality of the market.
there's a few ideas packed in there. Let's see if we can unpack it. Um, the first one is around standards. And once standards happen, they could be de facto standards and they evolve into full standards and then lock in effect. And folks, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM, is one of the phrases, right? So there's that element. And I'd be interested to know your thoughts around emerging standards or ones that are already established. Uh, and then there is this idea, and I know with Azteco, uh, it's around accessibility. It's about using habits people already have, which is buying mobile top-up vouchers. But instead of mobile top-up vouchers like M-Pesa was, which essentially act as a form of digital currency, uh, you're buying bitcoins and using wallets. So I know that's a couple of thoughts there, but I'd be really interested to know what your thoughts are around A, standards, which ones have emerged and been established. And we can talk about mobile standards, GSM, CDMA,
Well,
but
starting with
also, go ahead,
or
please.
before you put too many in there, I got to, I have to
Sorry, I have a habit of
I'm not
doing that.
taking
It's a
notes
bad
in
habit.
case you haven't noticed. But you'll have to jog my memory after I start ranting and raving. The When we talk about standards, the the way that Bitcoin works, the reason why Bitcoin was invented is because money, the fiat money that America has been um, suffering under, has no standard amount. It's not a fixed standard. It's a flexible standard. It depends who's in charge of the levers of the money supply to either contract or expand the money supply. So that's one standard that Bitcoin imposes on all the people who uses it. The other part is the software standard that nobody can just come in and change it, change the money supply or change the emission rate or anything else arbitrarily. Those rules are set in stone, very much like the rules that run FTP or the web or SSH or anything. Those are all fixed as well. And so if everybody's all centered on one standard, you have certainty in the market that this tool is going to do this thing the same way over and over and over again. And so any tool that can be changed by a committee in the same way that Ethereum has now gone to proof of stake. This is a unilateral decision made by a small cabal of people who decide to use it. And so if you're trying to build something that's going to last decades, you would be very foolish to build on Ethereum because the small number of people who control it now can do whatever they want with it. Whereas with Bitcoin, it is a fixed standard. It's an actual standard, like the gravitational constant and things like that, like the speed of light. It is one thing. It doesn't change over time. And so you can rely on it to do all kinds of math, do all kinds of database operations, and everything else you can do with a program in a database. And so the idea that you can have a world that works reliably without standards is infantilism. It's ridiculous. And I think a lot of the people who come into this new digital money scene don't understand the reasons why Bitcoin was written in the first place. Bitcoin was written to impose standards where standards had been lacking. And so to come in and say, we need to change Bitcoin because our business model is this, and so we need Bitcoin to change to accommodate our business model is actually completely backwards. What you have to do is you have to adapt to Bitcoin's abilities, its limitations, which are all rational and required, and whatever else it offers to you in the interface it provides to businesses and entrepreneurs and to programmers. So it doesn't make sense to try and change Bitcoin. Bitcoin is there to change you. You're not there to change Bitcoin. And so when people come in and say that it has to do this or has to do that, I mean, this has been happening for almost actually over a decade now. It's actually beginning to trail off as people who own Bitcoin have a common cause with Bitcoin running exactly the same way it's supposed to run every single day, because they know if some little guy who likes to have a teddy bear backpack comes in and tries to change Bitcoin, they're going to lose money. They're going to lose money, and nobody wants to lose money. Believe it or not, they have this in common, even the so-called socialists. And so there is a way to work with Bitcoin to increase its capabilities and to expand its usefulness. And a perfect example of this is Lightning. Lightning is built
Yes.
on top of Bitcoin. It uses Bitcoin properly, and it is the most fantastic piece of work many people have seen, I'm sure. It's done something and changed Bitcoin in a way that few people could have imagined. And so this small group of people, Elizabeth Stark and Oluwalua Osuntokun, these
Yep.
people have changed everything because they're willing to follow the rules of the network, and they're super creative, super talented people, and that's the way you change the way people use Bitcoin, not by changing Bitcoin. So back in the old days, uh, when they had the block size war, there were a group of people who were advocating for changing the block size because they said, quote unquote, Bitcoin doesn't scale. Actually, Bitcoin does scale if you understand how it works. And the way to scale Bitcoin is not by increasing the block size, but
Mm-hmm.
by building on top of it. And so whilst and also a part of what people are suffering today, and this goes back to what we're doing with Azteco, people are very impatient, very childish these days. Uber had to go through over 26 rounds, investment rounds, before they got to where they are today, a super profitable, ubiquitous company. And so today we have a group of investors who invest in many different things, who, if they don't see instantaneous profits, that they just don't want to be interested in anything that potentially could be profitable if you give it time to work. And so what we're dealing with as taking a step back is a group of people who are not long-term thinkers. They're not long-term thinkers. They're thrill seekers. They want to have the adrenaline rush constantly. They don't have any downtime. It's always on thrills. They're the sorts of people who jump out of planes with parachutes on and do skiing on the red piste.
Bungee jumping.
And bungee jumping, that's exactly what's points to my mind. Bungee jumping,
Shark cage diving with sharks.
exactly correct. And so there's nothing wrong with doing those things. There's nothing wrong with having a thrill. But if you're If you, as an entrepreneur and investor, are trying to build something for the future, expecting instant gratification and hockey stick graphs and all this kind of stuff that people keep going on and on and on about, it's not realistic. It's not mature thinking. And so, what Bitcoin needs actually are the long-term thinkers, the people who plan in decade stretches, so that at the end of these long stretches, we've completely transformed the world, brought Bitcoin's promise to everybody, eliminated the fiat money problem, eliminated the payer fraud online problem, and many other big intractable problems which seem impossible to solve now, but which are actually solvable all by Bitcoin, one database. It's absolutely incredible. And you can see I'm getting excited about it because it is
Yeah,
very exciting.
yeah, it is. It is amazing. Let's I don't mean to kind of segue too much, but a few of the ideas you brought up there, it's Julian Assange said this, I don't know, probably 14, 13 years ago. Um, he was talking about public key cryptography, and he said basically physics is on our side. Like anyone with unlimited resources cannot break this. It'll take them 40 million years to break it, right? GPG and PGP. So basically, what's happened is we've got this amalgamation of technologies that have imposed rules that can't be changed. I mean, you could fork it if you want, but it's inferior because folks want certainty. Anyway, they all come out of the same cypherpunk. I guess you could say a movement. It was really a collection of individuals, some of whom grew up close to where I grew up. Would you like to run the listeners through a little bit like that, what the French called fil rouge, which is like the red thread that goes through all of this? Because uh, so many of these cypherpunk ideas, which they built, cypherpunks write code, have just, as you just said, as you were just speaking, like they've just totally changed the way in which things operate and how people interact.
Well, a lot of these ideas, like Tim May and all these people
Yeah,
back in the 1990s, they
Zimmerman.
understood. Zimmerman is exactly right. Well, Zimmerman's one of the rare cases where um, he didn't just write essays about what was possible. He wrote a piece of software that actually made it possible. And this is another very, very interesting um, aspect of the era that we've entered into, where you have two ways of addressing problems. The first one is by writing about the problem, describing it, and then seeing if you can gather people around to build a solution to do something, a political solution or whatever it is. Then there's the other people who can write software. And if you can write software and describe the problem you're trying to solve in a formal way, you can write a program that can do the work for you, manage the aspects of the problem for you. So, Phil Zimmerman wrote PGP, which solves the problem of snooping on people's emails and breaking up people's private files. Now that it didn't capture the market because it's not a consumer level tool. It's a kind of a low level tool that's not easy for the normie to use. But the principle remains the same. He sat down and wrote a piece of software that completely solves that problem. And then, of course, took people like WhatsApp to come later and to abstract it away from the consumer so that you can get all the power of GPG and PGP without having to deal with your secret keys and key management and everything else. So what this shows is that software development is actually the superpower of this century. If you can describe a problem, and in the case of Bitcoin, it's the fiat money problem. If you can describe the problem correctly, you can write a piece of software that completely solves it. And because it's software, it comes with all of the other advantages of software out of the box as a gift. So this business of cypherpunks write code. This is very true, and it's very, very powerful and very important. But once this code is written, in our case Bitcoin, once this Bitcoin is written, the code has to be executed. You can't just have code by itself that's not running and expect it to solve problems. And this is one of the factors, this is one of the characteristics of the so-called Bitcoin community that um, I think is something that's missing in their formulation of how Bitcoin is going to change the world. It's not enough that Bitcoin can run on your machine. Other people have to be able to use it. And if they understood the history of these tools like GPG and PGP, they would know that PGP being able to do what it does is not enough. It has to be consumerized, abstracted away so that the ordinary person can use it without having to think. Because asking people to manage their public keys in GPG and PGP is not going to happen. It's a non-starter. And funnily enough, Bitcoin has private keys also. And so whilst it's very important for people to manage their own money, to have control over their own money, the means by which this is done cannot be left to the consumer to use arcane methods and tools that none of them have any interest in touching whatsoever. And so let's look at other consumer goods, other consumer tech, quote unquote, goods that have swept over the world. These are the smartphones. And so these smartphones, especially the Apple phones, are worth like $1,000 each. The vast majority of people who use these smartphones don't encounter any problems, don't get their phone stolen, and have literally just a trouble-free experience of using them. And so if they have a Bitcoin wallet inside that smartphone, and that Bitcoin wallet that has, say, $200 of worth of Bitcoin on Lightning, if their phone isn't going to be stolen, if their phone isn't going to be quote unquote hacked, then that Bitcoin on their phone is also safe and also can be used without any kind of trouble. So the obvious answer here is to have Bitcoin apps that anybody can use, that are super easy to understand, that abstract all of the difficulty away from people, all the complexity, all the bells and whistles and knobs and everything away from the people who are using it so they can just get on with using Bitcoin. And my go-to example of this is Wallet of Satoshi. Now, Wallet of Satoshi doesn't pass muster with the super hardcore Bitcoin people, and in one sense they're right, because it's not the keys that are used to send the Bitcoin back and forth, well, not back and forth, to send the Bitcoin and to receive Bitcoin, are not under the direct control of the user. But this is, once again, this is VHS versus Betamax. Which one of the wallets is going to become the world dominating wallet? A wallet where you have to write down your mnemonic before you receive your first transaction? Or a wallet of Satoshi, where you get it down from the App Store, and then literally 3 minutes later, you got $1,000 worth of Lightning right in your hand. And so if you're not thinking like this, that's perfectly fine. But what you cannot expect is to have the wrong thinking and then have the outcome you want, everybody being on Bitcoin, to come to pass. People are not going to write down mnemonics. They're not going to play these games. They're not going to take a hammer and bang seed phrases into metal and then bury it in the garden stuff. They're just not going to do it. Nobody is interested in doing that. And once again, if you go back to the early days of computer history, home computer history, people were building home computers, buying kits, and all kinds of stuff like that. And when the IBM PC came out, that was the thing that took off, because nobody wants to build computers. Computing is not about building computers. Computing is about playing games. It's about playing Hammurabi. It's a very old game. It's about doing that kind of thing. It's about writing letters. It's about doing your taxes. It's about spreadsheets. That's what it's about. It's not about the machinery. It's not about the gubbins. It's not about the rails. And so if you don't accept this, you either are just being stubborn, or you don't know your history, and that's perfectly fine. but don't expect to take over the world with that kind of thinking. It's not going to happen. I can tell you right now, at Azteco, we don't think like that. That's why our stuff looks different to everybody else's. That's why the way we speak about Bitcoin is different to everybody else, even down to the capitalization of the word Bitcoin. And so when our new batch of distributors come online, everybody's jaw is going to drop to the floor because we're going to have possibly the biggest distribution in the entire Bitcoin ecosystem. That's going to happen. It's going to happen in the next maybe 3 weeks. And so we're not just talking about this, we're doing what's required to make it happen. We're abstracting away all the complexity so that anybody can use Bitcoin at any time to save, send, and spend at will, and to get Bitcoin in the most simple manner possible. And believe it or not, most people on earth don't have $2,000 to spend on Bitcoin and just to sock it away and wait for it to go up. People have a need to use Bitcoin today in real time as we speak as a replacement for money. The only thing that's missing is they don't know it's possible. They've never heard of Wallet Satoshi. They've never heard of Samurai Wallet. They've never heard of Green Address
Moon Wallet.
or Moon Wallet. Even exactly right. But they will very soon because
Yeah.
the when this thing happens, which we've been calling for years the transformation, when this happens, everybody's going to be on Bitcoin. And then it's a matter of who has the best looking tools, who has the best onboarding procedures, who has the best method of delivery. And those people are going to set the tone. They're going to describe the language that everybody adopts. And it's going to be their vision of what Bitcoin is that takes over the entire world and not the other vision. It's as simple as that. And of course, there's nothing wrong with people doing whatever they want with their own computers. They can do whatever they want with their math, with a pencil and dice. They can do whatever they want. Once again, rational people with an expectation, which is an expectation everybody wants, that hyperbitcoinization happens and Bitcoin goes, becomes ubiquitous. Well, hey, if it's not working, what you're doing might be wrong. And so you've got to have a very clear-headed self-examination philosophy where if something's not working, you stop doing it and then start doing something that does work. Or you're going to be trundling along at the same level forever, where somebody else steals the fire of Bitcoin, and then we're going to be on a VHS world and not a Betamax world.
You've brought up a couple of times, I think, the WhatsApp example, and I use that sometimes when I'm chatting with people and I'm trying to explain this. I say, do you know how public key cryptography works? No. And I've tried explaining that, right, to lawyers who go blank in the face. Hash functions, they don't like it. That's one of them told me I studied law because I don't want to do math. So it's not a very effective way to communicate why this thing has utility. I asked them, how many of you have WhatsApp? Hands go up. I say, how many of you know how public key cryptography works? Hands go down. And I go, but all your messages are encrypted end to end. Moxie Marlinspike went and did that from Open Whisper Systems. And now over 1 billion people have got encrypted messages end to end, right? It's coming very soon, and there's got to be people who actually do the work in order to make it come to pass. Where they're not going to talk about Bitcoin distributed network, they're not going to do the all the various things. Let's segue into the next piece. Last week I was reading The Hidden Persuaders, which is a book that's about 70 years old, and it's about kind of the birth of consumerism in the United States of America post World War II. And you and I can talk about Edward Bernays and freedom torches and things, but he's adjacent to this. What's been kind of interesting, and we've started to see, well, that's not very good English. uh, the claims leveled against the Bitcoin network, it's too slow, it's too expensive. What happens if the miners, we have the miner collapse thing, uh, ESG, so on and so forth. Like, most of those have disappeared. I'd be interested in your thoughts around A, why that's happened, hidden persuaders, Bernays, so on and so forth, Packard. And then B, the one that I see coming, which is the privacy one. Because of course Lightning solves that. But I'd be more interested in your thoughts around those
Well,
kind of that jumble of topics.
well, it's interesting that you ask why did all this narrative disappear? And the question is, who is saying this? Who is talking like this? Who are these people? And what you'll find if you do any kind of scratching into the surface, it's a very, very, very small constituency of people, very, very small, in a circle that keeps talking to itself. There's literally billions of people who know nothing about any of this, who don't talk about any of this, don't think about it. And when they get Bitcoin in their hands, they won't think about it. And a lot of them will deliberately shy away from talking about it because it's just boring. And so, the, just to go back to the example you gave, um, nobody asked the questions about how WhatsApp actually works. If I remember correctly, WhatsApp is not a peer-to-peer service, is it? I mean, they got a central server there where the messages are encrypted, but a log of all the messages is kept. And so nobody asks about, well, what happens if the WhatsApp company goes down? And nobody says that. And they all gleefully use WhatsApp and send every kind of thing you can imagine on WhatsApp. Even the British government admitted that the ministers were using WhatsApp because it's private. So the questions that these people ask must be taken in context. Who is asking this question? What do they know about what they're talking about? A lot of the times they don't know anything about what they're talking about. And what is the effect of them saying these things? And when we're talking about software, the effect of people talking about software is, unless you're a parliamentarian or a lawmaker, is nothing, because people will write the software that they want to write. Like LNURL was written by somebody who wanted to solve a problem, and then lo and behold, it's just there. And that goes into Bitcoin itself. Somebody had the idea that Bitcoin was possible. They sat down and wrote it, didn't ask permission to write it. They didn't say, do I need a license to release this software, and all kinds of other guff like that. They just did it. The same with Phil Zimmerman, who wrote PGP. He didn't ask permission from the ITAR people in the United States whether he could release the software. He just wrote it and released it. And so software developers who have this correct mentality are the ones who are changing the world, not the people who merely ask all these endless questions, the answer to which they don't even understand when the answer is given to them. And this business of writing software and then releasing it is something that a lot of these people in the so-called blockchain space don't understand, because 9 times out of 10, these people will, the first question they have in their list of things to figure out about the business model is regulatory. That word, that regulatory, the R word, is there over and over and over again. Of course, there's another R word out there that Joe Rogan's now allowed everybody to use, but we don't talk like that here. But in any case, the this regulation, the idea that software needs to be regulated, databases need to be regulated, is something that only happens in a small group of people who are deluded, self-referential, and have no experience of what's actually software actually is, or the history of software and all of these tools going right back to GPG, SSH, and everything else. So it, it's very important that there's a small number of people who actually know what things are, who can actually describe things from first principles, not by analogy, and who understand their rights. This is especially true for Americans. You have a right to write software. There have been test cases about it. Bernstein's one of them, where he was going to give a lecture about some arcane mathematical thing, and they tried to stop him because they said that somebody might be able to use this information against the interests of the United States. But no, because software is speech, he is allowed to write whatever speech he wants. That's his right as an American. And this goes back once again to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not money. Bitcoin is a database. That's a literal description of what it is. Bitcoin being money is an effect of that database, but it is not money itself. And so when you pare away all the analogies, pare away all the effects of what Bitcoin has when people use it, then you can get down to what it actually is and then apply the correct law to the regulation of Bitcoin. And in the United States, the correct law to regulate Bitcoin is the First Amendment, because that applies to all software development and all databases. And in fact, there was a tool about 7 or 8 years ago that allowed people to write all kinds of arbitrary data to the chain of blocks. This is before the ordinals fiasco. And what this showed was that Bitcoin was, in fact, just a database. You can write to it and read to it. Actually, you can write once to it and read out of it a lot of times. So without these examples, and many people actually need examples in order to be able to understand this stuff because it's completely abstract unless you're a software developer. Without these examples to hand, it's very hard for individuals, companies, and legislators to make a full assessment and correct assessment of what Bitcoin actually is. And what we've found is that it's not good enough to write down prose to explain what Bitcoin is in plain language. Their faces glaze over, and you can't get through to them. This is why it's important for Bitcoiners who want this hyperbitcoinization business to happen, to get Bitcoin into as many hands as possible in as short a time as possible, so that it becomes just the way things are. In the same way that BitTorrent is just the way things are, if you want to go out and get a movie where it's MOVIEZ, not MOVIE, then you get BitTorrent, you go and find a torrent tracker, and you get the movie that you want. Nobody can stop it. It's just the way that things are now. And when BitTorrent was written by Bram Cohen, he didn't ask permission to solve the centralization problem of Napster. He just sat down and said, there must be a way of doing this. And he came up with the most brilliant idea that these huge files could be broken up into pieces, and then the pieces could be assembled sort of ad hoc, out of order, on every client that's running a BitTorrent. It's absolutely brilliant. But this is yet another example of why people shouldn't ask permission to write software, especially Americans. I don't know about people in other countries, but Americans have rights. And if you don't guard your rights, then somebody's going to come in and spoil it for you. And there's a Brad Sherman, who's the number one wannabe Bitcoin despoiler, who says that Bitcoin should be entirely banned, which is completely insane.
Impractical.
Well,
Almost impossible.
Well, even if it was possible, that the fact that somebody believes that they can suggest such a thing is very, very terrifying. Who do you think you are that you can suggest that the First Amendment should be abolished? It's just incredible. And of course, this person knows nothing about the case law. And I use this person just as a placeholder. I'm not going to go at him personally. It's a placeholder for all the profoundly ignorant people who think that they know enough about Bitcoin to be able to write legislation. And they exist on both sides of the so-called aisle. And the ones who are, funnily enough, better than the Brad Shermans, write the worst offending laws. And they won't stop. They won't stop. They've been told they're wrong. It's been explained to them. But when, of course, you explain to them, their eyes glaze over. And they get their assistants to pen these absolutely anti-American abominations. And people take them seriously. And some deluded people actually hold them up as heroes. So we've got to spread Bitcoin everywhere as quickly as possible so that the understanding of what Bitcoin is goes in through the back door. Instead of going through the eyes and ears, it goes through, I don't know, the third eye of these people. And then they understand it because everybody has the Uber app, because everybody has WhatsApp and it's encrypted. No, you can't break Signal. No, you can't break WhatsApp. It's encrypted. That phrase, it's encrypted, is just a normal phrase. It's not a frightening thing. It's not a threatening sounding phrase. It's just the way things are. Today it's raining. Yesterday it wasn't raining. It's encrypted. It has to be just like that. It has to be just like burgers and fries and milkshakes. And if it doesn't get to that stage with Bitcoin, oh no, I've just sent in Bitcoin, then we've got a problem. Because Bitcoin must be normalized. It must be de-risked in the minds of these people. The only way to do it is to make it ubiquitous.
I would have thought that something that goes up in US dollar terms over 12,000% in 10 years, suddenly like folks would just like look at the math, right? And that's actually kind of one of the topics we've been talking about, like is mathematics.
Yeah, well, the problem here, to interrupt you, is
No,
you've
go.
combined two things together, folks and maths. And 12,000%. This is an increase that is incomprehensible, literally incomprehensible to your average person and to your average politician. They can't imagine what 12,000% is. Even I have to sit here and think, well, that's a really big increase. And so I'm sure you've seen the videos of this guy in Times Square who asked people how many stars are on the flag of the United States, or does the moon go around the earth, or the earth go around the moon, and they're absolutely completely clueless. And so this is the average condition of the American people. And if you start talking about Bitcoin and how much it's gone up over the years, start showing them charts, you're going down a path which can only lead to more trouble. And of course, with the charts, these news people, the CNBC news people, that show the chart of Bitcoin over 24 hours, and it's a line going like that straight down, and they'll say Bitcoin has crashed, and then this is why people say zoom out. And
Yeah.
so when you say zoom out, you and I would know what zoom out means because we're both inductees in the Bitcoin cult. But to these CNBC people, zoom out means nothing. To them, well, they're just like this Orwellian world where yesterday doesn't even exist. It's only today that exists. And today we're at war with Eurasia, and tomorrow we're not. And that's all there is to it. And so to talk about 12 years ago, 12,000%, all these kinds of things, it to them it's meaningless. It's just noise. Have you seen Idiocracy?
Oh, yes, Mike Judge.
Exactly.
Office Space is also quite funny.
Yeah. Well,
But yes, Mike
Idiocracy,
Judge is quite prescient.
yeah, Idiocracy is the world you're actually living in, and unfortunately, many of the legislatures all over the world are characters right out of that movie, except they're not funny.
Let's do two things because I know we're coming up on time. The first one I wanted to ask you about, which is not a summation, but it kind of spills out of some of the stuff we've been talking about. I have a book on my shelf at your recommendation, Good Money, Birmingham Buttons. So if we zoom out and we kind of look at why would this synthetic money simulation distributed database Bitcoin, why would it have gone up in US dollar terms? You could use the Bolivar Fuerte if you wanted, or the Argentinian peso. It doesn't matter. Turkish lira.
It does matter. Why would it have gone up? And
Yeah,
you mentioned it yourself by mentioning the Zimbabwe dollar, which doesn't exist. And so the value of Bitcoin in Zimbabwe dollars is infinite because there are no Zimbabwe dollars.
correct.
It's divided by zero. And so what's going to happen in the future is people are going to stop thinking in dollar terms and think in Bitcoin terms. And then when Bitcoin has all the psychological characteristics of money, the dollar will take the other side of this thought process. And people will think first about the value of something in Bitcoin, and secondly, in in dollar terms. And you can see this effect right now when you're in France and or in the EU and you are dealing with euros on a daily basis and you have to have access to dollars, you think in euros first and the dollars are on the other side of that. And if you're in America dealing with the Australians or with the British, sterling's on the other side and you're on the dollar side. And so what has to happen is that everybody has to be on the Bitcoin side. And then all fiats will be on the other side. Everybody will be on the Bitcoin side psychologically. And that's when the flip will have happened. The transformation will have happened.
Somebody, if you're going to be trading in a market, like somebody's going to be taking the fiat money in exchange for Bitcoin. And again, we're coming up on time, but let's poke that idea a little bit.
Well,
So fiat money is printed, it's created, it's put out through fractional reserve banking, and then somebody exchanges it for Bitcoin, which means somebody takes the fiat currency and gives Bitcoin, right? How does that dichotomy work? Which is to say, velocity theory of money, and it's only got a market value if people are willing to exchange it. And especially given your work with Azteco, which is trying to make sure people have got small denominations of Bitcoins, which they exchange for fiat currency, so on and so forth. How do you think about that?
well, I think about that in this way. If you think that the dollar system is a non-fraudulent system and it's actually the thing that everybody wants, whenever you think about Bitcoin, you always inject the dollar into the conversation. So when we talk about people buying Bitcoin, small amounts of Bitcoin, um, what the dollaristas say, what the dollar fetishists say, the dollar inured, the dollar hypnotized people say is, well, you're going to want to buy something and it costs X dollars, and so blah, blah, blah. But there is going to come a time when people don't think like that. They see things priced in Bitcoin. And when that happens, which is a point in the future, then this whole dollar exchange business will be a thing of the past because you can buy things that are denominated in Bitcoin. And this is already happening to a small extent. But we imagine, we are predicting that it's going to happen much, much more. And what will force this to happen is the emergence of a billion user Bitcoin ecosystem. And where these people are, neither here nor there, they are coming, and they're coming for their own reasons, whatever those reasons are. The merchants will be coming from the opposite end because payer fraud is completely eliminated. That's one of the reasons why they'll be doing it. And so it's a matter of writing software to price goods in Bitcoin and fiat. And so once this happens, once that software is written and deployed, and once there's a commercial need, a commercial incentive to provide prices of goods you're selling online priced in Bitcoin, this will help the feedback loop, and then all kinds of things that people can barely imagine will start to happen.
Akin, it's you would have loved this. I go to Turkey often. I just came back last week, and I don't know how much I had in Turkish lira in the wallet because a lot of it's cash based, not all of it. And then I'll go back, I don't know, in a few months. And I said to someone like, why would I hold this Turkish lira? Because given the annual inflation rate, if we believe the CPI number, which is manipulated, if I keep these in my wallet, they're going to be worth 20% less in 2 months' time, right? So I said, would you exchange them? You can buy your groceries and things, and it should be fine. And send me Bitcoin on Lightning, which is what happened. And what was kind of interesting was, how do we denominate the Bitcoins? So let's use sats. What's a sensible number in sats, given that the lira will be worth 20% less, something like that?
Well, this is a market operation, and
Yeah.
when you go to the airport, you'll probably see this more and more. There's always a bureau de change after the customs place. So people, because they know that people want to get rid of their local currency and buy the currency of the place where they're going.
Yeah.
And so,
Coincidence of wants, essentially, which is what that money's meant to replace. And it's
exactly
going to
correct.
barter.
Exactly. So,
Yep.
you can imagine these bureau de change places all starting to sell Bitcoin to people who are exiting whatever country they're exiting. So instead of, if you're going from Turkey to the United States and you buy dollars at the airport in Ankara, then you will buy Bitcoin and take that with you. And so that's how that problem gets solved. And once again, this is about not thinking in dollar terms, not thinking with your fiat hat on. You start thinking with your Bitcoin hat on, then these sorts of things become basically obvious. And then business models also become obvious
Mm-hmm.
because these bureau de change will all need a method of turning local currency into Bitcoin on demand from people who want to get Bitcoin, whether it's at an airport or anywhere else. And so, what's the easiest way that this can be facilitated for all of these companies using a method that they don't have to understand in any technical way that involves just the printing out of a piece of paper? That's what Azteco does. And
Yep.
so, when you start thinking like this, start thinking like a real Bitcoiner, where we're trying to insinuate Bitcoin into every single nook and cranny because Bitcoin is money and it's a money with a high demand that people need to get in the easiest possible method. Then when we talk about things like airports, talk about turning Turkish lira into other kinds of money, what what people need to do when they're exiting one jurisdiction, going to another, and they need one fiat instead of another. All these things become obvious. And of course, when let's say you're going from Turkey into Germany, where they have the euros, if you come into Germany with the Bitcoin on your phone that you exchanged for the lira in Ankara, then when you get to Germany, there's another bureau de change place where you can buy the euros that you need to spend hither and thither. Or in the far-flung future, which is not too far-flung, by the way, you can use the Bitcoin directly with any merchant that will take it, and they will all take it. What's it going to take to do that? All of the point of sale devices having a QR a QR displaying panel where you can flash your lightning straight to that point of sale. And so that, once again, that's another business idea, and some people are working on this, obviously, where the direction is to pay Bitcoin for goods and services. And so it doesn't take much imagination to go to the next step where you're in Ankara, all the stores and all the people using Bitcoin, you never have to use lira there, use Bitcoin. When you go from Turkey to Germany, when you get to Germany, everybody's using Bitcoin. People aren't using the euros so much anymore, and so on and so on and so on. And then what all of a sudden you wake up and, hey, wait a minute, what is the local currency here? What is the local currency? Nobody will know because nobody's using it. In the same way that many young people have never dialed a telephone before. I'm sure you've seen the videos of people have
Rotary
dialed.
phones.
Say again?
Rotary phones.
Rotary, yeah. Okay. So there you go. QED. A rotary phone is a way you use to dial a phone. And so you have to, put your finger in the dial. And teenagers today see a phone like this and they have the slightest idea how it works. That's going to happen with Bitcoin, where nobody knows what the local fiat is because it's been all but abolished. And everybody's using Bitcoin. Nobody's using fiat anymore. And in the same way they're all using WhatsApp and Signal, nobody uses the local SIM cards anymore. They just get an internet
No,
account.
you use Silent Link or you use what's the other one? You get an eSIM,
Exactly correct. That's
right?
exactly
And it
correct.
works and it's cheaper, and there you go.
And Silent Link is actually very, very, very good. You just pay a little bit of Bitcoin to Silent Link, and you have this eSIM. You install it, and then wherever you are,
And it works everywhere.
yes, and it works everywhere. You see, now this is I think those guys are absolutely genius. Those, for me, are the real those are the real Bitcoiners because they're providing something that's not only super useful for anybody who travels, it's private, it's absolutely brilliant. They should be given a prize if there were prizes for Bitcoin entrepreneurialism. I love those guys. I think Silent Link are the absolute kings of the consumer Bitcoin wave that's coming next to us, of course. So
Yes.
it is going to happen. And that silent link is just one example of the kinds of places that Bitcoin is going to be insinuated into, which is SIM card provision that nobody can imagine. I don't know anything about how the GSM network works at that level, but those people do. And they take Bitcoin and use it in their context to fulfill their purpose. This is why Bitcoin's so powerful, because it's not money, it's software, it's a database. And that database can be applied to literally any service that's provided in software. It's absolutely incredible.
And then once things are automated as well, because it's software, so you can plug things in, and then it becomes even more powerful. And then, yeah, as you say, like one day, I mean, we know about dollarization of economies, right? They give up on the local currency. We're dollarizing US dollar, so on and so forth. El Salvador's one, Zimbabwe was another,
Yeah.
go on and on. And then, like, Ecuador also dollarized.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But
not enough
those
time.
countries all countries will be Bitcoinized. And one of the biggest Bitcoinized countries, believe it or not, is Nigeria. And this has
Yes.
happened in the face of very ferocious opposition by the federal government in Nigeria.
Yep.
So, like the number 2 or number 3 country on earth for Bitcoin use. And they've done it without any government assistance or anything else. It's all done through smartphones. So, we have the models, we have the examples of how this is going to happen. It is going to happen, and it's going to be wonderful and very, very useful for everyone.
It's fascinating the Nigerian case, the Naira. I mean, go trash the local currency, and then people start using Bitcoin on their cell phones. We knew this from M-Pesa. I think it started in Rwanda. This is 20 years ago or something. So this is like Azteco. They already know, like, M-Pesa by top-up voucher, have the M-Pesa thing, and so on and so forth. And then they started using it as currency. The other interesting one is kind of what you mentioned, which is when all these forces are stacked against it and people are still doing it, they're finding a way. There's the resourcefulness um, of folks, but also it shows a real pain point.
Yeah.
Why would they be doing that if they didn't have the pain point? And why would they be going to such lengths if the pain wasn't so hurtful? And they're doing it.
If it didn't work, nobody would be doing it. The
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, it does work. And with Wallet of Satoshi, it works so quickly that nobody can complain about it. And
Yeah.
so, what I expect to happen is that these Nigerians and the diaspora Nigerians are going to be instrumental in spreading Bitcoin to many, many countries. What's missing to an extent is the simplified on ramps, which Azteco is bringing. And so this is going to happen again and again and again. And it's going to be the whole world's going to be painted in with Bitcoin in many, many different ways, from these Nigerians to Silent Link to you name it. And there's going to come a tipping point where there's so many people using Bitcoin, thanks to Lightning, that it's just going to flip overnight. And then Lightning and Bitcoin is going to be absolutely normal and ubiquitous. And then we'll be in a very different world where money is flowing around the world basically instantaneously. And most of these transactions are going to be $20, $30, 50, 60, because that's the size of most of the transactions that the ordinary people make. Obviously, the rich people will have their own services, and you'll have the Coinbases who will transform into I don't know, a Morgan Stanley or Rothschild bank size thing, which is only the super rich go to. But for the ordinary common or garden human being, they will be on paper vouchers and wallets on their smartphone, and they'll be using Bitcoin in the same way that they use SMS, sending it hither and thither at will, without anybody glowering over their shoulder or saying that you've had too much orange juice today or something else like that. It's just not going to happen. And I say that sort of flippantly. But with this CDBC thing that they're trying to launch in all these totalitarian countries, they will be taking account to what you're buying with your quote unquote money. And it's not about stopping the terrorists; it's stopping people from literally eating too many sugary foods and that kind of thing. They'll be able to have a super fine grained observation and control over what people spend and where they can spend it. And completely aside from the fact that every country will be siloed off from every other country because these systems that they're developing will be incompatible by default and design. And of course, Bitcoin is not like that. Bitcoin is global, ubiquitous, frictionless. And so we've seen in the Nigerian case that if people have access to these apps, they're going to go to it. They're going to use it. It's just too good. It's too useful. It's just too nice compared to their local banks and everything else where it's hard to use, nasty to use, invasive. And even people who don't care about their privacy, the other friction parts of it are so horrible, they're not willing to put up with it. And this is another thing people don't seem to understand. The philosophical problems of the fiat system and the roots on and off of it are not people's concerns. They're concerned with having their time wasted. They're concerned with going to a bank where you have to go into a glass cylinder and be examined by people glowering over you to make sure you don't have any weapons. It's that kind of system which is very, very inhuman and horrible. Whereas if you have Wallet Satoshi, you just beep, get your money instantaneously without having to talk to anybody, go anywhere, or do anything. This is far more attractive to the ordinary person. And it's going to happen. And we've seen it happening. It's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So the question is, how can we help push this forward? How can we help make this transformation happening? We are doing our best at Azteco by making Bitcoin widely available to a literally astronomical number of people. That's about to be announced. And everybody else has to do what they think is going to help. Legislation is not going to help. Calling for laws, patting yourself in the back because you got some law passed, that's not going to help either. This is a practical problem of writing software, building businesses, and helping people to actually do the thing they need to do. That doesn't mean necessarily understanding how the blockchain and all the minutiae of transactions works. It's about showing them on the most basic level, you don't have to live like this. You can live like this, and this is better than this. You can show people that we have experience that proves that this is true. Because when we talk about Azteco, it goes in one ear and out the other. But when we show it to them, we show them how it works, the light bulb goes off. They have the eureka moment, and they go, "Oh!" They say, "Yes, exactly right."
So two pieces, because we are way over time, but that's a good thing. The first one is I sometimes use this because often folks will say regulations, like, are they changing? Is it good? Is it bad? So on and so forth. I say to them, look, like there's already, and you could probably correct me on this, how many users of Bitcoin Lightning are there out there? Or Tether, we know that's about 150 billion in US dollars that are tokenized on Tether. I just go, look, I've lived in Mexico, Vietnam, and Brazil, and Argentina, and Turkey. And I go, they're already using it. They don't need permission to do it. They're using it, and that's because entrepreneurs have built businesses, written software, commercialize, deliver to people where they are, right? So it's already happening. It's a process, of course, so it takes time. A. B, and because we are coming up on time, we usually end these episodes thinking about the future, which is up to you. Like, I know we've talked about the future a lot already, but
Well, the future,
listeners always like it. So,
the future does literally belong to the people who are working in Bitcoin. And it's up to us to say what the future is, just in the same way that Travis Kalanick and Uber decided what the future of taxis are. He said the future taxis are going to be Uber, and he's completely right. And so this idea that Bitcoin has to be regulated in order to reach this future is completely false. And if people understood how anything works, they would know that WhatsApp has the same classes of encryption tools, public key cryptography in it that's used in all Bitcoin wallets. And so they don't ask for WhatsApp to be regulated before it's even released, or once it's released to be regulated. They just accept it as the way things are. And so this goes back again to people not understanding how Bitcoin actually works, that it's not money, that it's just another piece of software, just like WhatsApp is, just like Signal is. And so you can't have a special um, class of thinking for Bitcoin that's not applied to other things that are not Bitcoin, but use exactly the same tools. And so going back to the final thrust that we're talking about, the future, I predict, and my predictions have been very good, by the way. You can go to my
Yes,
Medium and
quite
see,
prescient.
super prescient. I'm not patting myself on the
No,
back,
no, no,
but
but
I
it's
am.
all out there and
I'm
it's
allowed
on
to
the
do that.
internets and like anyone can go and verify it. So
Exactly correct. And
it's a
so
compliment.
the future, I'm telling you right now, and I can say this because I'm actually cheating, because I know what's coming next, certainly from this desk right here. The future is going to be ubiquitous Bitcoin,
Huh.
where their uh, access to Bitcoin is made available to literally over a billion people, so a billion and a quarter people. And it's going to be normalized in a way that people simply cannot imagine today. That's going to be the next stage. It's all going to happen on Lightning, essentially. And so what we're going to be seeing is the so-called mass adoption event that everybody's been talking about, everybody's been wishing for. And of course, wishes don't write software, but I'll concede that. And so this is what's going to happen next. It's going to be a deluge of new users. These new users are going to bring the the normie expectations to Bitcoin services. I think most Bitcoin wallets are not prepared for this, but they will adapt and they will normize their stuff, or they will be um, relegated to the
Extinguished.
what extinguished. Exactly correct. Just like all the computer brands like Commodore and stuff no longer exist, but
And
the people,
AOL doesn't exist.
and exactly correct. And Apple does, because Apple and its iOS is the super consumer computer product. This is going to happen in Bitcoin. But before we get there, everybody has to have access to Bitcoin, just like people had to have access to the internet en masse for all the effects and all the great tools that we take advantage of, and like this one we're on now, come to pass. And so that's what's coming next. A deluge of people. And it's not just me making an empty prediction. Before people can come in en masse, they have to have easy access to Bitcoin. That's what's been missing. And so Coinbase has 90 million users. 90 million is smaller than 100 million. It's smaller than 500 million. It's smaller than a billion. So when we have access to those people and put it right in front of them, that's when the big magic's going to happen. And of course, there's many things that have to happen to activate those people. That's the word that they use, activate. But there are people working on that, clever people, Edward Bernays level people, which is going to be the requirement. And once these things happen, we'll never look back. Actually, we'll look back with a lot of fondness to this pre-transformation days, and we'll say, "Do you remember what it was like? Oh my word! Do you remember when the fees spiked up because of ordinals? Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember the days before Lightning, etc.?" You know, it's like, oh yeah, well I gave Beauty on 2 Bitcoin as a tip for one of his essays. Did you know that? Yeah, it was me. That actually happened to me, by the way. Somebody gave me a tip of 2 Bitcoin for something I'd written, and we'll all look back on these days and think, "Wow, how he lived." This is coming, and we're doing our best to make it happen. You're welcome.
I am old enough to remember when the internet came along. I'm 38, about to turn 39. And I remember the pre-internet days, and then 1994 happens, Netscape Navigator, so on and so forth, right? And so I got to live through that kind of period. And then this is another one, which is what you're saying. So I'm agreeing with you. It's like things change, and then people can't even imagine like how it was before. And you go, oh yeah, I was there, and so on and so forth. Rotary telephone, or like amateur rocketry.
Oh yes, SDs.
Yeah, like all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's really great that we get to live through another one of these, but someone does have to do the work, and I know that you are right on it. So thank you so much. Akin, where can people find you on the interwebs? I know that you're on the Bird app X.
I am, and you probably have to show the my handle on, just underneath here somewhere like this. And but you can find me on the internet at, well, first of all, you can find Azteco, which
Yes.
is AZTECO _. And my Twitter handle is Beautyon, which is BEAUTYON _. And what's common to both of those is the underscore, because both of those names were taken before we got on there. But that's where you can find my Twitter feed, my X feed, or my X posts. And in my profile, you'll find a link to all my Medium articles, which I've collected in one place, where you can see that I've been predicting everything that's happening over and over, and also predicting the failure of the tokenizing fad, which I under Nesse called the token frenzy, which takes that apart to pieces. And also there's another one that's very good, I have to say so, where this blockchain, not Bitcoin fad is taken to pieces. There was a time when people were saying the interesting thing about Bitcoin is not Bitcoin, but the blockchain. And of course, that's utter rubbish. And it had a very bad effect, by the way, people trying to raise money, people trying to build Bitcoin businesses. But that's over too. And so what we're waiting for now is for the next fad to be over, so that we can get to the actual meat in the sandwich, which is Bitcoin distributed to billions of people. We're very close now, and so get ready for it.
Well, Akin, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great chatting with you. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed it as well.
I did.
And hopefully either Elizabeth or Ryan at Lightning Labs will come on soon, and we'll pick up there, because it is just utterly amazing what they've built, and you are using it. And well, hey, it's one step at a time, but excellent work at Azteco. Thanks to you again for coming to join me.
Thank you very much for having me, Benjamin.
Well, there you have it, folks. Akin Fernandez, CEO and founder at Azteco. I hope you enjoyed the episode. For US listeners, wisdomtreeprime.com, Apple, Android app stores, subscribe, share, Spotify, YouTube, wherever your purveyor of fine podcasts is. Find me on the Bird app at Benjamin Dean. Now, I'm so glad that you've waited this long all through this episode for what's really the best part, and that's the disclaimer. I need to state the following to clarify: the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of Wisdom Tree and Azteco and are subject to change. Anything we present in the podcast is not intended to be relied upon as a forecast, research, nor as investment or tax advice. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are not a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities, or reliance upon them is at the sole discretion of the listener. Please remember, past performance is no indication of future results. Thank you again for joining. I hope to see you next time, and have an excellent day.